All right, ladies and gentlemen, hi, I'm Joe, he's Nick. You are listening to the Nick and Joe Show on ThinkRadio.ca. This is segment number 2. So if you're listening to us on Friday morning, good Friday morning. Otherwise, you're catching us on the live show. And this is, as I said, segment number 2. And we just had quite a discussion about Chinese I don't want to say infiltrating, because we rolled out the potential Chinese spies on a Canadian Forces base, and we rolled out, we invited them and rolled out the red carpet, it seems to me. And when I say red carpet, no pun intended. And if you think, ladies and gentlemen, that that's just one of those things that's unbelievable. Wait till you hear this. Okay. So, actually, you know what, Nick? I think I'm going to let you set this one up, okay? Because you've been following the story a little bit more, and you're more. I take this story a little not so much tongue in cheek, but I'm always looking for the humor in things, okay? And so I think this is kind of funny in certain respects, although serious. But I'm going to let you take the lead on this, Nick, because your head kind of explodes on this stuff, and not without some justification.
Man. All right, this story comes to us from the Hamilton Spectator today, and before I get into the story itself, I have been saying for a while that this vaccine, the COVID vaccine, first of all, is unnecessary. The vaccine, yes, there's a lot of people who get the virus, a lot of people get it, but very few people are actually hugely negative impacted to the point of death. I mean, the death rate is very, very low. And I had a friend from who we used to work for StatsCan send me the latest statistics on it, and you wouldn't believe the numbers. They're very, very small.
Yeah. Not only is the death rate very low, the actual illness rate is very low. So there's a lot of people out there that are testing positive for the virus who actually never develop any. They don't get sick. That actually is the norm with this virus. Most people experience no symptoms, or at most very mild symptoms. So, right. Okay. Anyway, I interrupted you, Nick. Go on.
That's quite all right. So I've been saying all along that when the vaccine comes, I don't want it because I don't think we need it. And I've also been worried about the idea that the government's going to try to somehow enforce a mandatory vaccination. Now, on the surface, a mandatory vaccination would be very nearly impossible. But there are different methods and tactics that they can use to get enough people to go along with it so that they have a large percentage of the population that's vaccinated. And this is where the story gets interesting. Again, from the Hamilton Spectator. Ontario is about to examine the role that proof of COVID-19 vaccination or immunity passports will play in society as new daily cases remain near record levels. Let me stop there. New daily cases. So what? Look, if you had 1,800 people dying every day, okay, that's a serious issue. But just because, as you just pointed out, somebody gets COVID doesn't mean they're even going to get sick.
Right, anyway. And not that they get it, but that they test positive for it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's like saying I tested positive for red blood cells. Well, of course I did. Anyway, I digress. With the first shots expected soon, the province reporting 1,819 more infections on Wednesday, Premier Doug's Ford government is looking at providing tech-based certificates, in addition to alternatives for people who prefer not to keep such records on devices such as smartphones. Following a warning from Health Minister Christine Elliott that there may be some restrictions placed on people who don't have vaccinations, her office said in a statement that dialogue is beginning on what consensus will develop given the highly contagious nature of the virus. One more paragraph and then I'll quit. We look forward to working with our health experts in Ontario's businesses to discuss how we can continue to operate safely, whether or not providing proof of vaccination will have a role to play. Okay. This, I have always said, when they get to this point, is the beginning of a very slippery slope. show me, Joseph, and you know better than anybody else that I know, a government program that started off with the best of intentions, small, very well targeted, and there's hundreds of them, that didn't turn into a monolith and grow and begin to feed like crazy to keep itself alive. No government program I know of has ever concluded its mandate and was disbanded because its job was finished. That's just not the way government agencies work. So, am I wrong? Do you think that this is going to go away once everybody's vaccinated, or are they going to just continuously expand the kinds of people who have to get a vaccination?
Okay, well, you've raised a couple of really interesting points, Nick, and I want to try to address a few of them in order. But before I do, let me just point out, as I'm sure you agree with this, Nick, and that is, this is the subject that never wants to go away. For the last 10 months, we've wanted to not talk about this, but it just seems that every few weeks something more outrageous develops that's associated with it, and we just cannot not address it. And I just wish the whole thing would go away. But here we are once again having to talk about some of the problems, and I'm going to backtrack a little bit, because there are a number of things here that I think have to be addressed, and this whole idea of having to have this vaccination, quote unquote vaccination passport or whatever,
right,
to attend certain events, it's predicated on some very wrong ideas and thoughts about this particular virus. So I hesitate to do this, but I think for the sake of really putting things into a good perspective, if listeners will bear with me, I want to step back a little bit and talk about the issue more broadly. So the first thing, Nick, you, as have many other people, are focusing on the question of how many people are actually getting sick or how many people are dying from this virus. And I submit to you that that's actually not the problem. And what I'm going to say now is actually going to sound somewhat positive to the government, okay, or somewhat in line with the government's thinking. I don't mean it to be, and I don't think they're thinking this way after all anyway, but again, bear with me. The issue here, okay, is we all know, and the data supports this, that the vast majority of people who are actually carrying the virus don't get sick. And that's human nature, by the way. We carry lots of bacteria and lots of viruses that don't actually result in some sort of an obvious illness where we're getting sick or it's affecting our lives or our feeling or whatever. That's there. We carry many viruses and lots of bacteria, and in fact, virologists and doctors will tell you that in many cases these viruses and bacteria actually are necessary for our health. So the very fact that you're carrying the COVID-19 virus doesn't mean that you're going to be sick, okay, in the traditional definition of being sick. Some people are feeling symptoms. Some people are experiencing serious symptoms that require treatment and even hospitalization. Most of those who experience these more serious symptoms are experiencing them in conjunction with other preconditions, particularly the elderly. Okay, so most of the deaths and indeed most of the serious illnesses associated with COVID-19 have come in long-term care facilities. That's the majority. Okay, so really when we talk about locking down, to the degree that that's effective, and I would argue it's not, but the goal here is really not to prevent illnesses, to save people's lives. There's my air quotes that viewers can't see. The goal really is to reduce the infection rate because we don't want to overload our healthcare system. And overloading our healthcare system is something that we're in danger of doing, even though most people don't get ill from this. And that's a symptom not of a large number of sick people. That's actually a symptom of a poorly designed and administered healthcare system. In other words, we ration in this country healthcare. We have in this country a certain number of a certain number of ICU beds, a certain number of other hospital beds. We have a certain number of doctors, and we are at risk when we have large numbers of infections, relatively speaking, that require hospitalization, of overwhelming our ICUs and our doctors and our hospitals. And that's really what the problem here is, that we're trying to, that's the issue here is, what can we do to reduce the rate of infection in the population, which is problematic right now. It's problematic right now, but it's not problematic right now because we're ravaging the population. It's problematic right now because we're getting into the numbers, even though they're pretty small. We're still overtaxing our healthcare system. So this is an exercise of protecting our healthcare system. Now, again, I stress, locking down the economy, shutting down the economy isn't the way. It doesn't appear to be helping. But I will say this, in a kind of an ironic way, if we were thinking about it, if governments were thinking about it properly, they would realize that even if the rate of infection continued to climb and we were overwhelming our healthcare system by not shutting down the economy, by not closing businesses, that actually would be taking then, and then if we were to say, let's say, hypothetically, we're going to go to all of the businesses and say, we have a healthcare emergency. We're going to do a one-time surcharge on the profits out there, in order to have some emergency hospital beds. In New York City, months ago, they built an outdoor hospital in Central Park. Never saw a single patient, by the way, but they built it. And we could do the same thing in order to ensure that our healthcare hospitals are not overrun with these patients. And here's the thing, Nick. I'm not saying that this is what we should do. I'm just saying, hypothetically, if we did do it, we wouldn't shut down the economy. People would not be losing their jobs. Businesses would not be closing left, right, and center. Okay, we wouldn't be, and insofar as the Treasury is concerned, the government is concerned, it would be cheaper. Okay, to do that. It would be cheaper to do that. So. But nobody's thinking about this from an economic perspective. They're thinking about it from a healthcare perspective. Now, I know I said I was going to be a little long-winded. I'm coming to the close here, okay, of my monologue. So we think about this from a healthcare, from a human health perspective. Well, as we know, okay, most people aren't actually getting sick from this, all right? So it doesn't make sense to take these drastic measures in order to prevent people from being sick, because very few people are actually getting sick from this. So you have to take an economic perspective on this, and my solution seems to be somewhat radical, but hey, rather than saying on BC, but in Alberta, where now they're talking about